Welcome to The Happy Nurse, the podcast that encourages nurses to offer themselves the same compassion that they so freely give to others. I am Elena, a registered nurse on a mission to reduce burnout in nursing. Let's jump in. Hi everyone. I just wanted to jump in and introduce my guest for this episode before we jump into the actual episode. So in this episode, I am chatting to Shannon Swales. Now, Shannon and I have been communicating with each other since 2021. This episode has been a long time in the making. Shannon, like myself, has had her own burnout journey. Being a psychologist, a healthcare professional too, she understands the nuances of burnout, compassion fatigue, vicarious trauma, and moral injury. And I thought it would be a really amazing opportunity to have a chat with her on the pod so that we could unpack these big four topics. So this episode just unpacks what even each of these phenomenons are and what to look out for symptoms. Now, in no way is this meant to diagnose or treat any of these phenomenons. If anything in this episode resonates with you, please seek assistance from your GP or a psychologist or a counsellor. There's also links for additional resources and helplines in the show notes for you if you feel like you need to get some assistance. But this episode is filled with wonderful content. Shannon now specializes in helping her clients who are midlife women, which I know a lot of you who listen to the podcast are. And she's also got her own podcast called Midlife Reclaimed. So I'm going to disappear now and let you enjoy the episode. Hello, everyone. Welcome back to the Happy Nurse podcast. Today I am joined by Shannon Swales. She is a psychologist and she specializes in burnout. Welcome to the show, Shannon.
Hey, Elaine. Oh, thank you. I'm so happy to be here on the Happy Nurse. Followed and known about the Happy Nurse for some time, so it's a pleasure to be here.
Oh, thank you. This has been a long time coming, actually. We've had conversations for years about you coming on the show.
Yeah.
And then obviously I disappeared for a while and we finally got there. So thank you for your patience. I really appreciate it.
Oh, my pleasure. It's really lovely. Like I've had a visual flashback already of coming across you. I was on the train or something, coming across your work, and I was still in my burnout experience. And so somewhere along the recovery line, back at work, but casually. And I don't know if that's an accurate memory, but I know there was a finding you on social media or popping up because, of course, the logarithms knew where I was at. But yeah, I loved your work and love your work. So yeah, it's great to connect.
Thank you so much. And I also love your work. You've got a beautiful podcast called Midlife Reclaimed as well, don't you?
Yes, which did start off as burnout, a different kind of gap year when I was on my recovery. But yeah, I've morphed into working mostly with midlife women in that overwhelmed, stressed, burnt out state, just because midlife women were the women that were connecting with me. And I went, oh, like this is interesting. And I'm a midlife woman in my mid-40s now and early 40s when I burnt out. So yeah, I was just like, yeah, really interested in the area. So yeah,
it's a fascinating area. And I'm also in the same kind of age range as you. And it's that whole transition as well that we go through at perimenopause and our children start leaving home for those of us who have children, and there's this big identity shift. And yeah, it's such a kind of major milestone in our lives, isn't it? Like a landmark kind of time.
It is. There's so much happening in that period. Yeah, that of course will have various impacts on what goes on internally for us for us, everyone's different. But yeah, the empty nest, all those things, perimenopause, definitely I'm in it. So, it's such a shifting time. And I think, yeah, and therefore such an important time to have support and knowledge and yeah.
Yeah, most definitely. It's a real crucial time. They used to say midlife crisis, but I don't think it is. I think it's like a midlife awakening. You kind of
I love
start to come into yourself, don't you?
I love that, and that is so true. That's been a lot of the experience for myself so far, and awakening, I like that because yeah, I first saw it written or knew of, oh, midlife crisis, and it's like I saw in a textbook I was reading for a job that the human behavioral development theorists or whatever their terms are, they were starting to call it a midlife correction, an opportunity
Mm,
to correct, but correction kind of implies that we're on the wrong path or I don't know, I like the awakening. Language is powerful, so whatever suits it.
mm.
It doesn't have to be a crisis. It may start out as a crisis, it might, but the crisis can lead to an awakening, or we can avoid the crisis and have an awakening. Yeah. Yeah,
I
hopefully.
always think
Mm.
just when you stop with the people pleasing and the putting others before yourself, and you kind of think, "Do you know what? I'm done with this. I'm gonna be me."
Yeah.
That's
Yeah.
been my experience, but that might not be anyone else's, but
No,
that's how I've kind of experienced.
I think for a lot of women, they may not necessarily be aware that's what's happening, but when I'm working with them, that often that is the journey we end up being on through exploring what's going on for them, that they are going through this awakening that I am coming sort of back to myself, but realizing there's some blocks or barriers like the people pleaser, perfectionism, lots of those behavioral patterns that have been with us for a long time. And then also external barriers as well, maybe,
Mm.
like lots of things, and we're working through that. But yeah, it really is sort of a shifting in to, me, you, like that I matter and yeah, that journey can just be harder and more challenging to come to. So having that extra support, like in my case, psychologist, and I went and saw a psychologist as well. But that's what it was for me too. It was really yeah, it was I sometimes call it a selfish time, but I mean that in a very loving way, that self-focused, that I really needed to get to know me, and I think midlife is a really primed place for that. Mm.
Yeah, I'll have a bit of an overshare here, but I've shared this before.
Mm.
I used to suffer terribly from homesickness. Obviously,
Oh.
I'm I'm Scottish. I've been in Australia now for 15 years. And it wasn't till my marriage ended 9 years ago, and I realized I don't think I was actually homesick for Scotland. I was homesick for myself. I'd become this person who I'd
Oh.
lost connection to who I was. So I'd become the mum, the wife, the nurse, the daughter, and I'd kind of lost Elena. So that's kind of how I
Wow.
describe it, is that I was homesick for myself.
That is beautiful. I've never heard it articulated in that way, but that would be other people's ways to explain that too, a homesickness for ourselves.
Mm.
Wow. Yeah, I got goosies when you said that. So my
Oh,
body,
thank you.
my soul, like, I always say when I get the goosies, I think it's that soul connection. It's like, "Oh, wow," because I lost myself too. I didn't articulate in that way, but I think my soul just related to your soul and a different word that wow, because that could be another woman and how they explain or how they feel it. Like, I feel homesick, but not quite sure why. And now I've got that language, I can yeah, ooh, it helps someone else, like, you're
Yeah,
articulate that way. Homesick, yeah.
that's the only way I could describe it because, yeah,
Mm.
once I started to come back into myself,
Mm.
the homesickness disappeared. So
So it was you had a hypothesis and you worked on that, and like the scientist in me goes that you had a hypothesis, you worked on that, and it
yeah,
was right. It was right. I
and
like
I also think through all that, I was experiencing my second kind of
mm,
dalliance with burnout too, and, that's one of the main reasons I really want to have a conversation with you because I
mm,
know as a nurse, and you yourself as well, you've already shared you've experienced burnout too.
mm,
We're health professionals.
yeah.
We They're saying, some stats say as high as 60% of nurses
Yeah.
are
That's
experiencing burnout now. It's really high. I don't know if it's just because people understand more about
mm,
burnout is, it's spoken about more,
yeah.
but it's a real issue in our
Mm,
profession. I think in any healthcare profession, to be honest,
yeah.
because
like we were just talking about, you give and you give and you give, and you kind of start to
Mm.
lose that connection to whatever else it is that you want to be connected to.
Yeah.
I
Yeah.
was really excited to have you on
Mm.
the show 'cause as a psychologist as well,
Mm.
obviously got lived experience, you know all of the therapeutic tools, you know the science behind it all, and I
Mm.
just it would be an amazing opportunity for the listeners to have you on just to share what burnout is, how it differs from compassion fatigue or vicarious trauma, and I'd love to just have a conversation around that.
Yeah. No, I'm really happy to help, and I'm very much a big believer that knowledge is power. It empowers us. So whatever knowledge I can impart, that helps others out there. And yeah, nurses are one of the professions that, yeah, when you said 60%, last time I delved into the research, yeah, that made sense. Like the percentages are high and it's not okay. No one should have to live in burnout or experience it. Shouldn't be inevitable. It should be preventable. And it is, but a lot of things need to change. But yeah, I love like knowing about it is half the well, what's half the battle. But I think that's such a important battle because what I see with a lot of people who start to understand what's going on inside of them, it starts to reduce the shame or the confusion or the guilt sometimes, like somehow I'm failing and this is not okay. So yeah, I hope this conversation helps the nurses out there and anyone else listening. Yeah, yeah, to not feel those things because burnout isn't a personal failure. It's an outcome to
Hmm.
yeah, a lot of things, but we're gonna talk about that. We're gonna talk about
Yeah.
that. Yeah, I wanna share something that I actually wrote down because sometimes I don't articulate as well, but but I thought this kind of
Or
pulled together just as a starting point, and then I'll elaborate. But burnout is what happens when you're under relentless pressure with too much responsibility and not enough support or resources, we could say. It's chronic. So it's not just, we can feel a little bit burnt out, but burnout is chronic stress is cumulative. So it's yeah, like I don't know, that boiling frog syndrome, like you just put a frog in some water, but it slowly burns kind of thing. It's cumulative effect. And sometimes, yeah, by the time we're burning, we're still in that environment and it's hard to jump out. It drains your energy, it drains your empathy, and even your sense of achievement or effectiveness or sense of self in relation to that responsibility load you're carrying, whether that's work, whether that's parent, whether that's managing your chronic illnesses or yeah, whatever that chronic or that responsibility load that is chronic, running a household, caregiving, like so many things that we're responsible for. So yeah, I just feel like that kind of captures when I pulled that together and with the help of my AI, but pulling that together just to pull my thoughts together, I wanted to share it with how I wrote it down. Yeah, but
that's
mm,
that's beautiful, thank you.
mm,
And I think I'm listening to you and what you're saying, about that chronic
mm,
stress and the constant exposure to external stressors and the responsibility. You're
mm.
encapsulating a lot of nurses' lives. I
Yeah.
know mine, and I'm sure there's a lot of nurses out there are
Mm,
thinking, "Oh my goodness, that sounds like me."
yeah. It's almost like we know burnout is a systemic issue. So, yeah, I'm not saying it's also when I say systemic too, there's different system here. There's the workplace system, there's the industry system, there's the team system, then there's the cultural system, our culture that we live in. But then there's also the internal system and how we show up in that too. And all of that interplays together and can be a recipe for burnout. I like to draw we do live in a culture today that does not help, especially for women. Like if we get to the gender culture too, and what's expected of a woman, especially when I'm thinking about a midlife woman, your Gen Xers and late millennials. But I think in, other generations, this may be the same too, and would have been for the boomers as well. But less so actually. I think especially X's and the millennials, we I mean, it's beautiful. Women have been given a lot more choices these days. We have so much more opportunity. But we also have the load that our foremothers had. You know, we're still the caregiving role at home, the running of the household at home, and we still live in a culture where women are taking most of that load whilst also being in jobs and carrying a career, because we have that opportunity now, yay, and for those women who want that, you know, whatever their roles are, but trying to manage both, all those things they're all responsibilities. They all need something from us, which we may be really wanting. You know, like I want to be a parent, I want to look after my family, I want to look after my elderly parents, whatever it might be, and work. But we're human, and a human can't hold all that, but there's still this cultural expectation that this is the role women take. It's shifting, it's changing, don't get me wrong. I know I don't want to create any enemies out there. I know it's shifting and changing, and men are changing and the roles are changing, but we still live in that pattern. So, yeah, with nurses and being a predominantly female, I believe the percentage is still more female than male, that shifting.
It's about 90% female
Wow.
still. It's
Okay.
still very female, yeah.
And I know psychology is very female driven still. I don't know what the stats are currently, but a lot of the female-led or professions that female go into tend to be quite caregiving in nature. You're helping others, even teachers, educators, early education. Meanwhile, they're also caregiving for their family they're creating, or they're caregiving for their elderly parents or whatever they're doing. It's a lot. And funny enough, the burnout literature does indicate if you're female, you're more at risk. if if you are married and female, you're more at risk. So it's I mean, we'll see those stats changing, but I think it comes back to that cultural view. If we want to see a difference in burnout, we really need to continue to shift the culture, continue to look at those emotional, mental loads and shifting and changing that from a global, not just organizational, if we want to see, preventing burnout, from it happening. Yeah. But that's
Yeah, thank you for that. I'm sitting listening, absorbing it all. And it kinda I used to say when my kids were really young and I was working and sorry, I'm getting over COVID, listeners. I've already shared with Shannon. That's why I'm a bit snotty, but I'm okay. When my kids were little and I became a single parent, like, don't get me wrong, I'm all for feminism, I'm a big feminist. But
Mm,
I used to say how I summed it up was, I'd say, "I feel like I have to work like I'm not a parent, but I have to parent like I don't work." It was just this
yeah,
all-consuming kind of pressure and the guilt and the shame that comes with that of feeling like you're not doing enough for
yeah,
either your work or your children. It's was a heavy load to carry. So yeah, that's kind of what I was thinking of listening
mm,
to you talking. You can see how things like that, culturally, because I've obviously absorbed the
yeah.
culture around me to then make me feel in that way, and how that contribute to these feelings of stress, overwhelm, burnout eventually.
100%. Like, lady I interviewed for my podcast, Karina Schneider, she works in the burnout space as a coach, but particularly around return to work. But she spoke of burnout, and just with what you were sharing there too, is that relational, like between the culture and ourselves. Because, like you said, we absorb it. We don't mean to, but we're human beings growing up. We absorb what we're hearing, learning, watching, observing, all that, even in our professions, but yeah, in our family systems, in the magazines, all that. And then we can be, yeah, on the ground as an adult at 41 and holding all these, so that was the age that I burnt out, holding all these expectations that we're carrying that's creating the guilt and shame and anxiety. And yeah, it's just a recipe for disaster. But we do know with burnout, yeah, I think that relational between the systems, our internal, what we're holding, but also what the culture's holding and expecting of us too, and then the organization, and then I even like to go down to the teams. I've worked with people where the team has been had a lot of protective factors, like what I mean by that is just factors that don't harm, that they're supportive enough and things like that. But then the organization on top of that may not be so so much. And I actually worked in one that was like that. Team was great, but the powers that be that stood above. not so great. And yeah, and the approach to prevent it or recover from it needs to be approaching all angles that are impacting. And for the individual, for the nurse or anybody out there, the only agency we have in our control is ourselves, So sometimes it means we have to step out of that team or step away from that industry, which sucks. But where there's, where there's people unwilling to change, we might advocate with, in the end, we have agency for ourselves, and where that's possible. It's so tricky. It's so tricky. It's
Mm.
not a simple answer. But I know you mentioned earlier, and I don't want to skip this because I know a lot of people find this helpful, is those signs.
Yeah,
Would it be how? Yeah, because how do I pick it
definitely.
up? How do I?
Mm.
Yeah, how do I know what's and what those early signs are? And that's yeah, I'm like, I like to think of it. The thing that always comes to me and when I help and support others is knowing the risk factors is important. I don't know if it's an early sign, but it is a sign that is very common is people just saying, I'm really irritable. I'm snapping at my partner or whoever's in, our immediate vicinity, our kids, I'm snippy, I'm snappy. And I wasn't actually aware of that one till my husband mentioned it. He goes, oh my God, you're being really irritable. You're not yourself. And I'm like, huh, what? No, I'm not. But upon a bit of space, I was like, yeah, no, I am. The irritability, but the waking up and just being, this is hard because I think most women out there and most people out there are waking up tired all the time for lots of reasons. But that even if we've had a good night rest, just not, still feeling tired. I called it, and a lot of my clients call it, they're just drained. Like I
Mm.
feel drained. And so that's a big sign, irritability, drained. There can also be a sense of withdrawal not a sense, withdrawing, like finding on the weekends, like you get through your week, getting the kids off to school. If you don't have kids, doing the work thing or both. And you get to the weekend and you just don't have anything to give. Like really you didn't have during the week, but like I've got to get the kids, I've got to do this. It's sort of like I have to meet those responsibilities. But by the weekend, it's just like, and if you have
Mm.
kids with sports, I know, or other things, that's hard. But like just finding that they're withdrawing from things that they normally would be doing, let's like gym, maybe it could be that, or going out for coffee with a friend, or being able to help out. Like they're just noticing that they don't have much to give outside of those immediate responsibilities that they can't put aside. Everyone needs a paycheck and yeah, to survive, and the kids need us, so it's not something we can put aside. So that's another big one, is that people notice withdrawing. Yeah, and yeah, I think they're the biggest ones, but there's so many. Like the list of signs and symptoms is like 30 plus, and they cross over a lot with other things too. So it can be hard to go, is this burnout? Is this not? And this is where knowing what the causal factors are will help decipher whether those symptoms are burnout or not. If it's that responsibility load from, that we're holding and it's chronic, like you haven't had any breaks from that, and it outweighs the resources that you have, this whether that's external, internal resources like energy, then those symptoms are most likely burnout. That's how I look at it. Whereas, the causes, like, perimenopause can be very similar symptoms, to be honest. And, but that would be a hormonal cause, not an environmental cause. And sometimes they co-occur. Anyway, so always look to the causes. And this is where your professionals are really helpful to work out, what are these symptoms telling me? But those are some of the big ones for burnout. And stress, because stress plays such a big, like when we're flooded with that cortisol, the stress hormone, there's so many things like muscle tension. Like I was going to a remedial masseuse every fortnight because I had lots of shoulder, but lots of tension in the neck pain, headaches. Jaw wasn't so bad, but it was a lot of upper body. And that's another sign of burnout, musculoskeletal issues because of the stress we're holding. The body's continually tense. Often another sign is getting sick very often. See, there's so many. Does
There
that
are, yeah.
it's like, oh, there's a lot. Yeah.
I know I was sitting listening to you talking about the muscle tension, and
Mm,
I've learned over the years when I'm stressed, I clench my teeth,
mm,
and
mm.
it's now one of my big tells. Like if I start clenching, I think, "Oh, wait a minute, what is going on here? There's
Mm,
something manifesting in my
yeah,
subconscious somewhere." It's that kind of, yeah, I feel really kind of stressed, and I'm like, "Ugh."
yeah.
Um,
Yeah, and sorry, one of the cynicism too, like that's a big one. We can start to feel quite disconnected from our role, our work where we once felt connected. And I think the nurses, I just wanted to mention that because a lot of us get into these health professionals role because we care. We want to help,
mm,
we want to support. Sometimes we've had personal experience that has led us to that. And to lose that sense of care and sense of connection to our job or even to become cynical, but that's often a sign of burnout. It's just when we have that load distribution gap, like, the responsibility load versus the resources, our body stresses, and eventually we're going to lose that connection to the work. It's not that you're not a caring person, it's
mm,
the impact of being in a chronic stress situation without relief. And also people too start to feel like they're not great at their job. They lose their efficacy, how they feel their ability to do their job, where there wasn't that before. I had that. I just felt like I wasn't accomplishing or that I wasn't great at my job when other people were saying, "No, you are." And I was like,
mm,
"No, I'm not." And again, that's that you could be in burnout. It's an impact of being in a chronic stress load for too long. We start to second guess. We start to feel like we're getting nowhere because it does feel like we're getting nowhere because we're not closing the gap. We're not feeling resourced.
mm.
We're not feeling balanced. Yeah, ish. Yeah.
Would
Mm.
that be like a bit of imposter syndrome, kind of? Or is
No,
that something different?
I think that's something different, to be
Okay.
honest. I have a little bit of a I mean, imposter syndrome is certainly important. I think the imposter syndrome can turn up as a result of being chronically stressed, but imposter syndrome can be there without chronic stress as well.
Okay.
I just think we're more at risk when our body is chronically stressed, burnt out. We're more vulnerable to the stories we tell ourselves. And imposter syndrome is, yeah, like a narrative that we've come to know. Because before burnout, for me, I was always someone who was quite insecure around my abilities, in my work, but also my, just even social. But I had gained a lot of skills in that area. But when burnout hit, when I started to build and accumulate that chronic stress, it came back. So, yes, I think it could be the imposter syndrome, but just wanted to when our resources are down, we're more vulnerable
Yeah.
to the stories we've learned throughout our years, even if we've worked on them,
Mm.
and gotten through them. And people are like, why am I feeling insecure again? Or why am I second guessing myself? Because your resources are down. Possibly you're burnt out. Yeah. Mm.
Yeah, I like that your resources are down because
Yeah. Because that's what
it
burnt,
kind
like your resources are
mm,
down. It's not a personal failing. We need resources to do what we do, internal and external.
mm,
And they're lacking, like, a lot in our organizations and industries out there. I mean, no industry is perfect, but there's a lot of lacking.
mm. Yeah,
And
just like our bodies need food for fuel,
yes,
we
and
need resource.
that's another culture I can be on my that's a bandwagon with things, but that's another cultural issue with our nutrition changing and all the crappy foods we have out there now to choose from in terms of preservatives, and it's not easy to access healthy food,
Mm.
especially when we're busy, and junk food tastes bloody good. I like
Sugar and salt. Sugar and salt. I can't get my words
I
out.
know,
Yeah.
like, it's such a catch-22, need energy, have that quick, stimulant hit wherever you get it, and then we pay for it, and that I get it, I'm a stimulant junkie, I'm working on it. Yeah, it's just tough, but the system again not helping us. I mean, you go into a grocery store and what
Yeah.
70% of it is preservatives and junk. Like it's like, thanks big grocery stores for helping
Yeah.
us eat well.
Yeah, I saw a thing recently, and they had 2 kind of rows of food laid out. This was, like, on a path,
Oh.
and it was the food from the '80s in, like, an average shop, and then
Oh,
from now, and the amount of fresh produce that our parents would have bought back in the 80s compared to what we buy now, because now it's all packaged and convenient.
Mhm.
I can't remember the exact stats, but
Mhm.
I was significant. It was enough to make me go, "Wow, that's a really powerful visual," because it really showed that cultural shift that
Yeah,
we've had from,
yeah.
like, eating homemade, healthy, cooked food to this convenience, and I think that again reflects this society and this culture we now live in. It's that
Yeah.
convenience, it's that quick fix, it's everybody's feeling under pressure, so I must do this quickly, what's gonna be the easiest option, and that's what we end up grabbing.
And that's, and I don't ever wanna judge, anyone for doing that because,
Mm,
yeah, like, we're trying to but, like, those companies are not doing us any favors. They know and they prey on that, or my cynical brain goes there, but, like, they know we'll pick that and, yeah, it's there's a lot that needs to change to really help the human being. But and I always wanna give hope though that even while the system outside of us doesn't change,
mm,
there is things that we can do in our internal system that will help us navigate this stuff a lot more ease may be the wrong word, but, like, in a way that's more sustainable is probably the better way. Like, it is possible. I don't wanna kinda paint a doom and gloom picture. Like, I really and I see it with others, I see it with me, and every situation's different, but it is possible with that agency of ourselves. There are things we can do that will help us navigate more sustainably than what we have been.
mm.
So there's hope.
Yeah, as you said at the start, knowledge is power, so
Mm, mm,
understanding things and realizing that, there's other options out there, and we
mm.
can have that agency, and we can go off and do our own research and work out. I mean, I've just had to go through a whole journey with my health and
Yeah.
my diet and my lifestyle, and that in itself was a lot, and that's why I stepped
Mm.
away from the pod for a while.
Mhm.
Um, but yeah, again, it's knowledge is power, and I have really shifted and
Oh.
changed what I do kind of consume. I'm still a huge coffee addict. I can't get rid of it, but and I,
Me too.
I'm like, do you know what? It's my vice, and that's it, and I'll own it. So,
And I think it's about doing our best, isn't it? It's not about being perfect because yeah, we need to ditch that part of
yeah.
ourselves. But what I know I'm someone who had the perfectionism patterns. But yeah, like we just do our best with what we now know. It's not
Mhm.
about doing all the right things, just doing our best with what we know. And sometimes we need to take a step back from responsibilities like our pod to be able to focus on that. And you did that. Yeah, you created space to make those shifts.
Yeah, kind of
Uh,
thought I better
yeah.
practice what I preach.
I know, me too. 100%. We're not perfect. Agree.
When we circle back, it was in my head earlier when you were talking about being irritable, and I thought, I know sometimes that can show up as part of compassion fatigue. Am I right? Is that
Well, yeah,
uh,
like, again, the symptoms can be very, very crossed over. This is what makes it hard when we just do symptom focus. But if we look at the causal factor, compassion fatigue is that constant or sometimes it gets called the cost of caring. So we're constantly providing that empathic environment with our client or patient. Like we're present with their discomfort, their pain, their suffering, and we're providing, we're there, we're present. We're connecting with their pain in some way. It might be acknowledging, it might be listening ear, whatever that might be. And that holding that space takes a lot of energy from us. Even if we're really wanting to do that, it still takes energy. And hence the cost of caring. Sometimes that exposure can come to the point where we start to really, we've overused our resources. It's kind of a resource thing too. Empathy is a resource, compassion is a resource. Some of us, it comes too easier, and others, we have to work at it. But either way, it's still a resource we're using and it needs filling. And if we're not having those opportunities to refill, and sometimes that refilling can look like compassion into ourselves or time to process those emotions, the repercussions of continuing to do that, that we can be irritable. But often we find like the things to look out for compassion fatigue is if you're noticing sort of emotional numbing. It can be a way to try and like your body's trying to protect you because she knows our body's so freaking wise. She's the wise one. So she's finding ways to deal, and so emotional numbing can be that defense mechanism your body's doing because she's like, there's too much, I need to close off. Obviously we don't, emotional numbing long term's not great,
Mm.
but it's the body's response to that overload of emotional exposure. And there's also a lot of people I work with will report just dysregulation emotionally, like finding themselves crying before a shift or during a shift. And there can be very valid reasons, but just feels out of whack, like there's just a lot of it. So that sensitivity, has grown. So they're probably things that, okay, this might be compassion fatigue. It could also be burnout happening. I have both. And so they can cross over. They can co-occur and feed into each other. But look out for the emotional numbing, look out for that emotional dysregulation, the sad, that crying, because it's your body trying to metabolize and process that constant showing up and being present in someone else's pain, which again, nurses are doing a lot, and other health professionals as well, and even but particularly those who are facing people in pain, emotional, mental, physical. Yeah. Yeah. That's compassion fatigue, or it sometimes gets called empathy fatigue, just in case you
Mm.
see that out there. Yeah. Mm.
Thank you so much for sharing that. That kind of it makes a lot of sense.
Mm.
Can you just tell us a bit more about what emotional numbing might look like, how that might feel
Yeah.
internally?
Well, for me, I was just giving a personal example. I was, and I don't know if I suppose it was emotional numbing. Like I would, like I just felt like I didn't care anymore. Like logically or cognitively, I knew I cared and I was able to do the actions of care at work. But there was a numbing of the like I used to be emotive. I was in it, I was really feeling the pain of others,
Mm.
not taking it on, sometimes probably, but really able in that moment to be sitting with that distress and really acknowledging it. But I was, I just didn't care. But what I mean by the didn't care, and I'm a words person, so that was my way to describe what I was experiencing inside, which I couldn't connect with the other person's pain. I didn't, I just was finding to get through it, I had to, it's a bit like a dissociation a little bit.
Mm.
I like to think of dissociation as a disconnection. Like my emotional self was just turned off. Yeah. I know that's probably
Like
not.
you didn't have capacity, is that
No, well, it comes from that reality,
yeah,
not
yeah.
because of something else, because we can emotionally numb, dissociate for many reasons, particularly people who've been through trauma, trauma exposure, other people's trauma, our own. Emotional numbing, dissociation can be evolved in a lot of things. But again, and what's the cause? And for me in my work, being constantly exposed, and I had such a great, and it's come back, but I had a great skill at being able to really be there and be present and tolerate other people's distress and allow them to help them to go into it. Because facing our distress, approaching our distress is a really important psychological tool, but in ways that help us soothe, process, and so I help clients with that. But I wasn't able. Well, I was able to still do that, but from a very felt robotic.
Okay, yeah.
It didn't, like, I was doing the things. I was almost like in autopilot, but I wasn't feeling the things. That was probably, I was doing the things, but I wasn't feeling the things. And but it would spill out later because, hey, I'm human and I feel, even if
Mm.
I'm numbing or dissociating, I'm still my body's still consuming. And so it will come out as, crying and not being able to stop, or so there was numbing, but then like the tap, I was turning the tap off, but then the tap eventually turns back on itself and the emotions outpour because you can't you can't numb out your emotions
Mm.
forever. They will come out some ways. Hence why we can be irritable and snappy. It can come out aggressively, verbally, like
Mm.
talk, and not abusive.
Mm.
Sometimes I can, but anger can be involved as well. Yeah, but for me, it was yeah, it was irritability as well, snappy with my husband, poor guy. But we've gotten through that. But many years, but yeah. But hopefully that explains it. I'm probably yeah, yeah, but
No,
yeah.
thanks for sharing, and it's such a real life example. I appreciate your sharing your honesty
Yeah.
there.
Yeah, and for other
Alright.
people, it may not be the words of "don't care." I'm just very verbal, thought-focused person, so it came out like that, but the felt body experience was, yeah, like, robotic, like, I was just going
Hmm.
through the motions of caring, but I wasn't caring because I turned off I didn't automatic my body was turning it off for me.
Hmm.
Emotional numbing
Yeah.
and dissociation is not something we necessarily choose. Sometimes I was choosing, like, sometimes I would get into, like, my Netflix and I was doing it to push away. I didn't wanna feel, I didn't wanna deal. A little bit of that's fine. We all do a
Hmm.
bit of but if we're constantly doing that to avoid what we're feeling or dealing, yeah, that's not great. But, yeah, sometimes I knew what I was doing or food. That was a way to well, that was just a way to make me feel better. It wasn't to numb. It was just so I didn't have to feel what I was feeling. So that was a bit different. But, yeah. But this
Could
is
it be sorry, I'm interrupting. Could alcohol be used as well there to emotionally
oh,
numb?
that's a
'Cause
big one, yeah, and I often
I know a lot of nurses, and I've been guilty too. You go home and you pour yourself a glass of wine at the end of the day.
I must say I often forget this one, a lot of my clients will share this with me because it hasn't been my journey. My upbringing turned me off alcohol, um, but in a lot of ways but I went the sugar route, just bypass the alcohol, so sugar's my drug. But yes, and alcohol's such a great drug for this, and I say drug lovingly, it's, it's a legal substance, but
Yeah, it is.
it's a depressant, so it does help us numb out. So, yes, we can turn to alcohol, and it does make us feel like for some of us, we might feel, because the inhibitions are down, so, yeah, we numb out the crap and we just feel a little bit more relaxed and chilled. So it does a good bloody job, and that's what sucks, and it's 'cause we keep doing it because we're getting the reward, and hence, sugar's well, it's a different kind of drug in terms of
Mm,
it's a stimulant yeah, but alcohol's a depressant, but they both kinda help us in some sort of way to not feel, and yes, and it's such a huge issue because they are substances that we can become addicted to or reliant on and can affect us in so many ways, and I think of my midlife women as well because alcohol, when we're going through perimenopause, can, be a little bit of an Achilles heel, and so it's really hard, but we're also trying to deal and cope, and I can understand that turning to alcohol. But, yeah, a lot of women I work with that's either something they've already worked on and started reducing their use. Some stop altogether, but mostly reducing their use because alcohol, every now and again, not a big drama, but God, is it a good even though I don't use it, when I have had alcohol, it's like, it does feel good. Yeah, does numb you.
yeah, I mean, it's not my drug of choice, but I know back early days after I lost my mum, I was
Mhm.
18, and of course, that's what I turned to because it was just socially acceptable, you know what I mean?
Back in the 18 to 20, that period of time too,
Yeah.
alcohol's a bit more but yeah.
Yeah,
Yeah.
just the binging on the weekends and yeah.
I
I'd
think
turn
that's what
into the life and soul of the party because I didn't want to stop because I felt so good and yeah, it all makes sense, yeah.
and it's so, I think you bring up, yeah, that we're all trying to cope with something and it can be, yeah, grief and loss. And when it's something that is really quite accepted and yeah, like in our culture or in our age group as well at the time, and we turn to it and then we notice how we are on it and go, well, the rewards are great, and we keep going, and it's yeah, again, like a system issue as well. But yeah, like, and I see that too. I look at our TV and women in our age group represented, or women across the adult age group. They always have, or the shows I watched always had a glass of wine in their hand, and I'm like, what are we teaching? Like this is not helping because it's those subliminal messages.
Mm,
And I mean, Australian culture, right? Like I know it's similar to other cultures as well with alcohol and just that it's just normalized it. And I'm not saying alcohol bad and not drinking good, it's not as simple as that, but it's not helping us to kind of look at other choices and helping support that. It's just shoving alcohol in our face. And it's like, can you not? I get really irritated with shows that do that. I think it's changing, but just a few shows that come to mind that always had a glass of alcohol in the hand.
Yeah, I agree. And I think the more you notice it, the more aware you become of it. And then you notice it more. And then it's like,
So, you do it.
yeah, because I've been watching stuff recently too, because I've been recovering from my surgery and I've watched a lot more TV than I normally would. But I've been seeing like they come home at the end of the day or they have a fight with their partner or whatever. Next thing the bottle of wine's getting opened.
What do
Yeah,
you
it's a cultural thing, isn't it?
It is. It's like, because I'm a really big, I think one of the things culture can do, and we did it with smoking here in Australia, is you start to take away the visuals. Like we started to, plain packaging and, places that sold it had to only show 25% or whatever the rules were. But it was starting to help shift seeing the smokes in society. So then, hard for the people who are already addicted, of course, but helping the next generation coming up and making them expensive, things like that. But the visual aspect, not being sponsors for, sporting events, because again, we're a big sporting nation. So just, like if we want to see a shift, we need to see a shift in those cultural things where we're feeding the nation, the messages, so the TV shows, yeah. I mean, of course, if you have a character who's addicted to alcohol, you kind of, but just the normal day to day, not saying wipe it out altogether. It's a reality. But yeah.
Yeah, but it does just reflect like what we were going back to earlier about those cultural pressures that we have.
Yeah.
And we absorb all this stuff. So earlier you mentioned trauma
Mm.
when we were talking about compassion fatigue.
Mm.
And as obviously healthcare professionals, nurses, we witness people going through trauma all the time.
Mm.
And there's obviously this concept of vicarious trauma.
Mm.
What's the difference between, first of all, sorry, backtrack. What is vicarious trauma and
Mm.
how is it different to compassion fatigue?
Yeah, because again, they can co-occur, and they did for me. But vicarious trauma, like what they indicate, makes the deciding factor into that, okay, this is vicarious trauma, is when it started to shift your worldview. So this could be your sense of safety, your sense of trust in the world or others. Like it's really shifted things. So that trauma exposure you've had and vicarious means, other people's trauma, not what your own and what you've witnessed or happened to you, but you're listening and hearing someone else's, so vicarious. But it's that it has seeped so much into you, it's made you feel unsafe and distrust the world and hypervigilant. So very similar symptoms to post-traumatic stress disorder. But again, the causal factor is different. It's vicarious. It's come from that exposure to other people's trauma and that cumulative effect that has started to shift and change. So very similar symptoms, but a different label, a different phenomena. And I say phenomena, by the way, a lot today because these conditions are not considered diagnosable conditions yet. Yeah,
Okay.
you can say. So that's just why I say phenomena at the moment. But look, these are very real, very health conditions as far as I'm concerned. Burnout is somewhat recognized in the ICD-10, that 11, diagnostic manual for medical professionals, but it's still a little bit loose. But anyway, in terms of its diagnosis, but yeah, VT, vicarious trauma, certainly if you're feeling a sense of not feeling safe in the world, that you've noticed hypervigilance, that there's a lacking in trust in self or others, world, and you are constantly exposed to other people's trauma, then that could be vicarious trauma. And sometimes it's called secondary traumatic stress. And because of that compassion fatigue, that you're constantly, showing up, that cost of caring, you're providing, and that empathy that you're providing, that compassionate environment, can be with people who are experiencing trauma. And like you said, nurses are working with a lot of people who are experiencing trauma. And sometimes just being in hospital is traumatic
Mm.
enough. We're not necessarily talking the big T traumas, but being in hospital can be very traumatic for people. So, yeah, whatever the trauma that they're providing, that compassionate environment around and being present with, yes, if they start to see that they're feeling unsafe, trust is being, kind of waned and hypervigilant, okay, this might be vicarious trauma as well. Or, yeah. Mm.
That's really interesting, the hypervigilance part. I hadn't realized that. Like,
Yeah.
yeah,
There's so many because, if you look at the list of symptoms of PTSD, but even vicarious,
mm,
like you can feel like anxiety, even low mood. But I think they're just the key things to look out for that is different from the others that really, like when I used to work with people with PTSD, and it's that really kind of anxiety, but it's a sense of I'm not safe. I can't trust in, sometimes it's others, in particular others, or it might be the whole world, or even self sometimes,
mm.
bit of everything. And yeah, it's really those elements. And I was very surprised because I had no idea about vicarious trauma until I was in it. And then it just described what I was experiencing,
Right.
and I'm like, shite. Because I never thought I've worked with people with PTSD and I knew it wasn't PTSD because I'm like, well, I haven't experienced it. I'm like, this just doesn't make sense from a diagnostic knowledge.
Mm.
But then from a vicarious trauma space with that knowledge, I was like, oh, okay, yes.
Yeah, it's so helpful to know these. Like, you hear the terms used,
Mm.
but actually having the understanding of what that term means and what it looks like and how it manifests, it's
Yeah.
really powerful.
Mm.
So, can we step into as well, just while we're on this
Yeah.
kind of trajectory, moral injury? So this is more of a recent kind of
Yeah.
term that I've heard.
I think it's
Um,
had more airplay. Yeah. I don't know how long
yeah,
around, but more understanding of it. Yeah. And talk. Mm.
yeah. So how does that look, and how's it different to
Yeah.
the others?
Yeah, I love this. And actually, I want to read what I wrote because this was another one that I kind of, pulled together. Moral injury is when something happens that violates your sense of right and wrong, especially if you feel powerless to stop it as well, which a lot of us can. And it leaves a soul deep wound. I love this, like a disconnection from our spirit. I've had a few people that, they'd often describe their burnout to me because they recognize, oh, I'm experiencing burnout. But I feel, like it's a soul deep kind of soul disconnection. And often it can be this moral injury. And it often happens when people witness or commit or fail to prevent actions that betray their values, or they feel let down by a system. And I think this is where I'm like, well, yeah, like, I think of, for me, I didn't recognize I was experiencing moral injury, but after the fact and some way down the lines when, I was hearing about moral injury, that, I work in a system, most of my clients were under mental health care plans, which for those listening, in Australia, you get 10 sessions per calendar year, subsidized, not necessarily free, depends on the psychologist, to help with your mental health. And whilst this is very helpful and useful in our society, it really helps people access psychologists, it's often, it doesn't meet the demand. And whilst I can understand, that we can't necessarily meet the demand, there's only so much money in the budget and stuff. It just, when you're the person on the ground working with a vulnerable person who can only afford the 10 sessions and then they go without, but they're really quite unwell, but they can't access anything else because there's nothing else out there. It's, that's an example of a moral injury because your values are to help and serve and support and help this person to wellness, or at least to a point of stabilization, and that there's not the resources to meet that. So you're in this, value disconnection, but not of your doing. It's in the system. But that's where we can feel this moral injury. And I know that, I think I was writing down, nurses in the COVID period forced to triage care or separate dying patients from their families. That would have gone against their core values, but it was a systemic thing necessary in the context of the time. But like, still, they're a human being doing that. And that can leave them, feeling pretty shit. And the actual common symptoms to look out for there, I mean, again, knowing what you're exposed to could be really helpful. Okay, moral injury. But often the people presenting, they'll feel a lot of guilt, a lot of shame, a lot of betrayal, even like especially towards the systems that's creating it, or betrayal in themselves if it was them, not a systemic outside of their control. A lot of activists, a lot of environmentalists can feel this too in working in their fields. But nurses, first responders, anyone working in health, I think, frontliners,
Yeah.
force, a lot of defense force, they're recognizing the moral injury. It's big, because it's a big one.
Thank you so much for sharing that, because I'm sitting here and I'm listening and I'm processing and I'm just thinking, can't remember the exact number even. I think in Australia at the moment they've recognised that we're 85,000 nurses short. It's huge, like it's a huge number.
Mm.
So just that alone, you can then imagine the pressure that puts on the system, and then all the staff that are working within that system and the values that they have and the misalignment they're having, and yeah.
100%. And you can start to see how burnout can occur with moral injury, because that whole resource depletion to meet the demands, so chronic stress. But then because there's that resource depletion, there's certain compromises that you're having to make that undermine your sense of right and wrong, or, in those situations like that time with them. So we can have burnout and we can have moral injury, and we can have, we can have all of them, and I had
Mm.
all of them. I didn't realize the moral injury till once I was recovered, and I was like, "Oh, yes."
They're all so kind of interrelated as well. So this has been such a powerful conversation. So again, I'm going to go back to the start, and like we said, knowledge is power. And now that we've managed to unpack what each phenomenon means and how it could potentially be showing up, I
Oh.
think, it's been a very valuable conversation. Thank you so much, Shannon.
Oh, my pleasure, Elena. I do hope that the wisdom shared helps with the wisdom gained by the listeners, and to know, hope the biggest message is that, it's not a personal failure, any of these things. It's a result of that relationship with the systems we're working in and above the culture. And hopefully that takes away any sort of sense of failure or shame, and can help turn towards, well, what can I do? And there's a lot, that's another conversation possibly for us. There is a lot of things that and a lot of, I suppose, strategies and skills and ways and support that can, even on the individual level, can help make a shift or change for the better. Mm.
Yeah, and I think that's one of the key things, like you said, we like to offer people hope. You
Yeah.
you can recover from burnout. It's not the
Yeah.
end of it. It could be the start of a beautiful new journey. It's it's something that a lot of us experience. It's
Mm.
no failing on any kind of personal level. It's
Uh-uh. The-
it's just our body saying we need to kind of step back and have a look and
yeah.
see what we can do here to change. And
I love that. Like, I don't see, I know we use them as diagnoses, even though they're not considered diagnoses yet, but like burnout and stuff like that. But it's our body's telling us something. Our spirit is telling us something. Something's not okay here. It's a signal. Like, our body's giving us signals all the time. We've just in modern science and everything put a name to it and grouped it. But I think when we look at it just as a medical condition, we can look at it as a failure, like, I've got this and I've done something wrong. But it's like, no, 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 it's your body. Yeah, I really see that as burnout is a teacher. She's telling us something. And so is the
mm,
vicarious trauma, the compassion fatigue, even the moral injury. It's just letting us know something's not right here, something's not okay. Let's take a step back and figure this out. And sometimes we need that. We need to do that with someone who gets it, who can hold space for us. So, the professionals, or someone who's been through it, talking to a friend. So many clients tell me, oh, I opened up and shared with this kind of distance, but or colleague or something, and she went, "Oh, me too. I went through that." And then they had this really beautiful, validating conversation. So yeah, talking about it's important. And there's
Yeah, there's and there is help out there. So if any of you are listening to this and if any of it's resonated with you or you're concerned, we don't want you to be concerned, but please reach out,
yeah,
speak to a therapist, even go to your GP, get a mental health care plan.
yeah,
Um, it's help is out there.
yeah.
And
The beautiful thing, at least here in Australia, but people can access this across the world, but places like Beyond Blue and Black Dog Institute, which are well known here in Australia, or Beyond Blue is particularly, but Black Dog Institute, they're really sort of forerunners in really getting information out about burnout. Black Dog Institute has a health to health. I think they call it health to health, but it's specific for health professionals support, and it's free. All of this is free. So if it's not accessible for you to see someone privately, because I know money doesn't grow on trees, that those services are there and can be helpful and supportive, and they really understand this space, that our workplace, our work can injure us, and wanting to
mm,
help and support. And I think the Black Dog Institute Health to Health came out of COVID. They got that going pretty quickly to support the health professionals, but it's still going because they still need help.
mm.
I think COVID just let us know that this industry was already under stress. Now they're under more stress. Yeah.
Nurses also here in Australia have nurse midwife support and the Nurse Midwife Health Programme Australia. So I'll put the numbers or the contact details for all of these in the show notes, as well as Shannon's website and her contact
You
details.
can come and work,
And
like I do one-on-one. You can come work with me.
yeah, yeah,
And tell me
and
how
her pod. Shannon's got a great podcast as well, where she touches all these topics as well. So
uh-huh.
thank you so much, Shannon. It's been
Thank
an
you.
absolute pleasure.
It's been my pleasure as well. Thank you so much for having me on, Elena. I've loved this conversation. We can talk for hours, but
We can. Thank you for listening to the Happy Nurse podcast. If you've enjoyed today's content and would like to join the Happy Nurse community, head over to Facebook and check out the Happy Nurse AU Facebook page and request to join the Happy Nurse community. Also, check out happynurse.com.au for access to free downloads and subscription to my blog. See you soon, and in the meantime, remember to always offer yourself the same compassion that you so freely give to others.